In this podcast, two Gen Xers are taking a trip down memory lane, revisiting and reflecting on the cinema of the 1980s. We'll look at the hits and the flops, the studio blockbusters and art house indies, the critically acclaimed, and the universally reviled. The series is hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli, a writer and librarian, and features Dustin Morrow, a filmmaker, author, and professor of film. So pull on your legwarmers, crank up your boombox, and hop in the DeLorean. It's time for the Long Rewind. Welcome to the Long Rewind. I'm your host, Lisa. With me, as always, is Dustin.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about the films of the first half of 1988. How you doing, Dustin?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. You ready to talk about 1988?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I'm going to hit us with some news. You ready?
Yeah, what was going on in the world in the first half of 1988?
Let's put 1988 in context. So, in 1988, the Summer Olympics were held in Seoul, South Korea. On December 21st, Pan Am Flight 103, which was a transatlantic flight from London to New York City, was destroyed by a terrorist bomb over the town of Lockerbie, Scotland. All 259 passengers and crew on board were killed, along with 11 people on the ground. And I do remember this. I don't know if you...
I weirdly don't. I mean, I was a kid, but I don't know. I don't remember it.
It is one... I remember the news on it happening. I was 10 this year, so I guess I was a little bit more...
Presumably it was a lot of Americans, I guess, if it was a flight to New York City.
Yeah, I suppose New York Americans and probably some British folk too. The Iran-Iraq War had a ceasefire. The Iran-Iraq War, which began in 1980, finally came to an end on August 20th, with a ceasefire agreement brokered by the United Nations. The conflict resulted in significant casualties and economic damage for both countries. In February 1988, the Soviet Union began its troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, marking the end of nearly a decade-long military intervention in the country. A lot going on in the Middle East that year.
Yep.
On July 18th, a concert was held at Wembley Stadium in London to celebrate the 70th birthday of Nelson Mandela.
70th?
The 70th birthday of Nelson Mandela, the anti-apartheid leader, who was imprisoned in South Africa at the time. The event aimed to raise awareness about his imprisonment and call for his release. In November, George H.W. Bush, the Republican candidate, won the U.S. presidential election, defeating the Democratic nominee, Michael Dukakis. I'm sure we both remember that, too.
Yeah, Dukakis was such a bad candidate. I
don't remember much about whether they were good or bad from being there at the time, but that's the word now, for sure.
Yeah. It was just, it just meant that the 80s were all Reagan, essentially. I mean, it was just such
pretty much.
Yeah.
So the Summer Olympics were held in Seoul, and in 1988, the Winter Olympics were held in Calgary, Canada.
It's weird how they've occasionally synced up.
Yeah.
Because generally the Olympics are 2 years apart, the Winter and Summer Olympics. They try to stagger them, but, things do happen and they do sync up occasionally.
In the same year, yeah. I think that confused me when I was a kid, that I thought maybe they were always the same year and then realized later that no, they're not always the same year. So we got some pop culture news here.
Yeah.
Are you ready for that?
Yep.
The music scene in 1988 saw the release of many influential albums and hit songs, including Michael Jackson's Bad.
Had it.
U2's Rattle and Hum, Tracy Chapman's self-titled debut album, and George Michael's Faith. Some big titans of the 80s and beyond there.
Yeah.
The Wonder Years, Roseanne, Murphy Brown, Mystery Science Theater 3000, and The Simpsons all debuted in 1988. Some really, really big shows. The Simpsons still running...
amazingly. Yeah, and Mystery Science Theater, too, in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
Like it's been revived. And Roseanne, for that matter.
And Murphy Brown.
The Connors.
In fact, almost all of these were revived.
Yeah. Actually, the Wonder Years might still be running right now.
Yeah.
The new one.
Yeah, then
not sure.
So
as we record this, anyway.
All of those things have been revived.
Yeah. Well, Murphy Brown, that revival lasted not very long.
It didn't, but it was revived, I'm just saying.
It was. They have all come back around. I went to a taping of Murphy Brown once.
Oh, did you? It was such a great show.
Yeah, it was an
really
episode.
Good.
I was a huge fan of it, and it was an episode with Paul Rubens.
Oh,
was on it, so I got to see Paul Rubens. It's like any sitcom when you go see it taped. I mean, for me anyway, I saw a bunch of them. I saw Friends and That 70s Show. And what else did I see? I went to a lot of them. It was something I did when I lived in LA because it was free and I was poor.
And they fed you sometimes.
And they fed you, yeah. The thing I always noticed whenever I went is how wide angle the lenses on those big studio cameras must have been, because those sets were always really small.
So a wide angle lens makes it seem like it's really big.
Yeah, a wide angle lens adds depth of field. It adds space. So, and it's not surprising too, because wide angle lens keeps everything in focus because it adds so much depth. And so they don't need to worry about focus as actors move to the front of the stage and to the back of the stage. So if you watch a sitcom, like everything is in focus. Like if you watch Friends, you can see all the art on the back of the wall. And you can see the actors who are up closer to the camera. They're all in focus. But what I noticed after going to see some sitcoms taped and seeing how small the sets were, I started paying attention when I was watching them on TV to how many steps it would take for an actor to cross a set. And that's how you can see
how small it is.
Yeah, like you can walk across the entire Friends apartment in like 8 or 9 steps, and it doesn't look like it. But if you actually watch the actors and watch them move, you'll see that they can move from like one side of that living room clear to the other side of the, to the door. And they can do it in like 10 steps or so. It's pretty weird.
I never thought about that. And Monica's apartment to me looks enormous.
Because I know,
if you're familiar with New York apartments, it's
it's not very big. I've been there. It's not big.
Yes, that's so interesting. Next time we watch an episode, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. So what else was going on in pop culture?
Well, the controversy surrounding Salman Rushdie's novel The Satanic Verses was a significant event, leading to protests and debates about freedom of expression and religious sensitivity. And I presume that's when the fatwa went out against
which,
Salman Rushdie.
if eventually, somebody did manage to stab him in like 2022 or...
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember if it was because of that or not.
It was.
Was it because of that? Okay, yeah. So it's still...
well, they lifted it. I think it was lifted, and ironically, like if this is irony, he was stabbed after it was lifted, but
who was still personally.
But he was in hiding for decades.
Yeah, for many decades.
Yeah, have you ever read The Satanic Verses?
I would like to. I have not. It's one of those things that's like on my list.
I've never read any Rushdie, but I always find him to be an unbelievably kind of eloquent speaker whenever I see him, speaking in any kind of context.
That's why I'd really like to read it. And actually, I didn't realize, I think it's sort of supposed to be kind of almost a funny, tongue-in-cheek kind of a novel. So
really?
I didn't realize, at the time it sounded like, oh my gosh, it's this big, dark, scary deal. But
I don't remember what it's about, but I remember, but I have read about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Another notable moment was the establishment of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio, honoring influential musicians and bands. And that's something we always have fun watching every year.
Yeah, that surprises me that it's that new. I would have guessed it had been around longer than 88.
Yeah.
But
it's relatively new.
Yeah, you and I watch it every year, and the experience we have every year is, how is that person not already in it?
Yeah.
That's the first thing we think whenever we see who the inductees are. You're like, really? It took until this year to get that person in?
There's always some titan getting inducted.
And the second thought I always have is, really? That person's in, and Green Day is just getting in, and Green Day is already in? Green Day got in like 10 years ago? Like, how is this possible?
Sorry, Green Day and Green Day fans, but it's
there are certain... there aren't many artists. There's a lot of artists where I'm like, I can't believe they're not in. There aren't many where I'm like, what are they doing in? But Green Day is one of them.
Yeah. Well, since it's not a 90s podcast, I suppose that's fair. You want to hit us with some film news from 1988?
Yeah, for sure. So Rambo 3 came out this year. At the time, it was the most expensive movie ever made. It had a production budget somewhere around $60 million, which is hilarious now. I mean, it was $60 million in 1980s money, so I don't know what that would be today. But it's now it's not uncommon for big, these big superhero movies to be budgeted at $200 million and over. So.
Yeah.
Even adjusting for inflation, it's probably not that much.
Still has to not be as much as that, right?
And it didn't do that well either. It also was, it made, I think it failed to be profitable. It didn't make as much money as the second one. Die Hard came out this year and kind of changed action movies in a way. And you might argue Christmas movies, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about all of that.
Yeah, it was, it wasn't the first movie to have the kind of like everyman character who's thrown into some kind of situation and he has to fight his way out of it. But it certainly launched kind of a new subgenre of action movie. And to the degree that for, a decade or two after Die Hard came out, they were still, greenlighting movies that would be like Die Hard on a blank.
Yeah.
So it would be Die Hard on a boat or Die Hard on a plane or Die Hard on a, whatever. So there were just a million of them.
Yeah. Well, don't they still do that to this day? I feel like I still hear people use that phrase, but maybe that was really just more the decade after. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like maybe they were just more blatant right after. I mean, and then E.T. came out in October on VHS.
Oh, wow.
And I remember this. I remember this coming out and my dad getting a copy and bringing it home and being really not amazed, but like puzzled by the fact that the tape was green.
Oh.
Part of the tape, I should say.
I didn't
like
know
the
that.
part that flips up when you insert it into the VCR.
The flap
to reveal,
in the back.
the flap. The flap was green, and it was green because they were trying to combat piracy.
Oh.
It also had a small holographic sticker of the Universal logo on it.
Wow.
Kind of like the holograms you would see on a credit card.
Yeah.
And it was encoded with a process called macrovision, which was around forever. It might still be on, I think it's still on a lot of DVDs that come out. It's a anti-piracy process that scrambles the picture when you try to dub it to another, like dub it to another tape or any other, any other format. So yeah.
I didn't know that.
It was a huge seller. VHS sales came to about $75 million on just the ET tape. So it was a big hit.
I suspect piracy wouldn't have even dampened the sales of the ET VHS at the time, but perhaps I'm wrong. I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, I don't know how big a deal it was. I mean, it was obviously a big enough deal that they felt like they had to have this, use macrovision, and there were,
Well, I mean, as long as I can remember as a kid, I grew up on Long Island, so we would go to the city, New York City sometimes. And, for as long as I can remember, at least when VHS was a thing, I remember seeing, people selling VHS tapes on the street that I realized later were not the real thing. So, I mean, it's probably been around a long time.
Many of them probably taped with a camcorder right off the monitor, a la Kramer and Seinfeld, right?
Yeah, probably. I never purchased one, so I don't know, but that's my understanding.
All right, so let's get into the movies.
Yeah, let's do it.
What did you notice? Did you notice any themes in the first half of 88?
I'd like to hear your themes. I noticed a couple, but let's hear your themes.
I mean, I always try to group these together as a way to approach talking about them. And I guess the thing I noticed was there were a lot of really prominent comedies that came out around this time. Yeah. There were a few action movies that launched new action stars, guys that became huge action stars who I thought of as like being big all through the 80s, but really came out in the late 80s. And some prestige movies, some big bombs, some cult films. But yeah, I mean, I guess we could start with the comedies because that seemed to be like the biggest category.
Yeah, really. You're right. That's something I noticed as I went through too.
So 88, we saw Coming to America.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a very, very funny Eddie Murphy movie. Which you and I watched not too long ago, I think, right?
Yeah.
all of the Eddie Murphy comedies would probably be canceled now, it seems like.
Yeah, probably.
Like Trading
which is
Places
interesting, right?
and Coming to America is like kind of no exception. It has a lot of jokes that you wouldn't get away with today, which is part of what makes it such good fun, I think.
It is really funny. I mean, it's
It's also very
masterful.
sweet.
It's very well. Yeah, I was going to say that too. It's actually really, really sweet. It has a lot of heart.
Yeah. John Landis
Is the
directed the
director.
movie,
Yeah.
who made Trading Places as well.
Oh,
which I
right.
just mentioned.
Yeah.
Big came out, which was maybe the first movie that made people realize that Tom Hanks was a real actor and not just. He had kind of a reputation. You know, he made like Splash and The Man with One Red Shoe and like Bachelor Party and Bosom Buddies was a hit.
Yeah.
But pretty like broad comedy stuff. And I don't know that people were thinking of him as a real actor.
Yeah.
And he got nominated, I believe, for Big, which is a rare nomination for
a comedy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially in the 80s.
Yeah. And so it seems like a breakthrough movie in his career for sure.
This is sort of off topic, but you're reminding me of, what was that, like Dungeons and Dragons? Was that a TV movie or
Mazes
whatever?
and Monsters.
I don't know what year that was, but
it was very early 80s. That was one of his first kind of major parts.
He doesn't play a comedic role in that.
No, that's true. But
it's not intentional.
It's hurt by the fact that movie is so incredibly bad.
It isn't good, no. But just a shout out, I thought there might be some other 80s folks out there who remember that.
Yeah. I mean, I love it, as you know, but but it's not good.
Yeah, he kind of freaks out and he's obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons.
Crocodile Dundee 2, which was a big hit, sequel to the original. Not a great movie, but the original is still pretty funny.
Yeah, I don't remember anything about Crocodile Dundee 2.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think he faces off against drug dealers.
Oh, of course.
I think it's kind of reverse, if I remember right. I think what happens is it starts in New York. And then his wife or partner, whatever she is kidnapped and taken to Australia, which is like his turf, right? Yep. And so he goes and gets her back.
It's not a fish out of water movie.
No, it's like if my memory. I haven't seen it in forever, but my memory of it is that it's more of an action movie than a comedy.
Yeah, I don't remember it at all.
Hairspray.
Oh yeah,
came out, which was. Not technically the mainstream breakthrough for John Waters, but was kind of the first really big mainstream success. Like he made Polyester before, which is technically kind of a mainstream movie by his standards, made with a real budget. But Hairspray was his biggest budget by far to that point, and kind of a mainstream breakthrough for him. And it's a much gentler
it's
version of
palatable.
Like it's if you're a John Waters fan and you want to introduce someone who's doesn't really know John Waters to John Waters, it's a good what's the word
like introductory what's the word gateway film.
Gateway, yes. It's a good gateway
John
movie to find out where you could show it to people and be like, did you like it? And if they say yes, you can be like, well, what did you like about it? And you can get, if they say certain things, you can be like, well, hey, I got good news for you. This guy made a lot of movies that are quite different.
I really like Hairspray. And what was I going to say? I think, I don't know if it's the first film to do the whole...
the round robin.
Yeah. Movie to Broadway musical back to movie of Broadway musical thing that has kind of happened a few times now.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it really is wild.
They did a live one of those live TV things. Right. Martin Short was in it, I remember.
Oh yeah.
And Maya Rudolph, I think, might have been in it.
Oh yeah, she might have played like Motormouth Mabel.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Actually, I think she was maybe his wife.
Oh, okay. It was Marty and Maya. Yeah.
I don't remember.
I don't know if this is the first John Waters film I saw or if it was Crybaby. I'm not.
Crybaby came right after this.
Sure, which one I saw first. Yeah. But I didn't see them on this year though. So yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite John Waters movie?
Oh my gosh, that's really hard.
It's not hard for me. And I love John Waters, but there's one to me that is clearly way out in front.
What's yours?
It's Serial Mom.
Yeah,
which is also his favorite. He considers that his best movie.
Pretty great. Yeah.
Yeah. Beetlejuice came out in this time. That one took me a while to come around on, but I like it quite a bit now.
Yeah.
As we tape this, they're making a sequel. Maybe by the time this is out, it'll be out. I don't know.
It's also been a Broadway musical, I think.
Yeah, it has. Well, famously, it's the Broadway musical where Lauren Boebert got kicked out
that's
of.
Why? Yeah, we don't need to go into that. But yeah.
doing untoward things with her partner.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's got like, Catherine O'Hara's great and Winona is great. It's an iconic Winona Ryder movie. It's
it's very iconic.
As Winona Ryder is the face of Gen X in film, like it's one of the key texts in that way.
Yeah,
Beetlejuice.
I think that's true. And I always forget that Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin are in it, but they're pretty fun in it.
Yeah, they're the
too.
dead couple that contract him to get rid of the people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, this is also one of those movies that I think it took me being an adult to appreciate it, which is weird because I think a lot of kids liked it at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was a killer year for Keaton.
Oh, mm-hmm.
I mean, I think in this back half of 88, we'll be able to talk about Clean and Sober.
Oh,
Which, not to get ahead of us, I guess, but do you remember it was a big controversy in 89 when it was announced that Keaton would be playing Batman.
Oh.
And people were like, really? Mr. Mom is going to be Batman? There was like, it was like one of the original. Now these like hooplas are a dime a dozen. Anytime they announce anybody playing a superhero, people are always like, what a terrible idea.
Right. Well, there also weren't a lot of superhero movies then either. So
no, it's true.
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And people were really mad. And of course he turned out to be maybe the best Batman we ever had.
He's like everybody's like the Batman.
Not for everybody.
Or to a lot of people, to a large
For me, he
of
is.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But anybody who saw Clean and Sober, and in some ways Beetlejuice too, because it's so dark, I think would, if you could just thought about it for a second, you'd be like, oh yeah, this guy could totally be Batman.
He's got a lot of range. He's got a lot of range.
And can do darkness really well.
Yeah. We all know that now for sure.
Yeah. Bull Durham was a big hit. That's one I've tried to like it. I've tried to watch it several times. I know people love it. Some people consider it the all-time greatest sports movie.
Yeah, tell folks. I mean, I don't know if folks are as familiar with Bull Durham these days. Tell them what that one's about.
Oh, it's about minor league baseball, and Susan Costner plays a minor league baseball pitcher who's mentoring Tim Robbins, who's like an up-and-comer, and Susan Sarandon plays this kind of like groupie who picks a player every season to have an affair with, and she has an affair with both of those guys.
Oh, right.
But she kind of falls in love with Costner. I don't know. It's not bad. I see why people like it. I don't know. I never really got into it.
Would you say, is it the film that kind of made Kevin Costner the sort of sex symbol he was for a little while there, or did that happen before Bull Durham?
Well, that's a good question. He had done his breakthrough, I guess we talked about in the last episode, was Untouchables.
But I wouldn't call that like he's so sexy kind of movie, whereas Bull Durham probably is that.
And he made a movie called No Way Out around this time, which might be in the back half of 88, actually. Maybe we'll get to it.
Okay.
Or maybe we've already talked about it. I don't know. It's all a blur.
It does become a bit of a blur.
But yeah, I mean, No Way Out is one of those like... It's firmly in that like jagged edge kind of fatal attraction world of like erotic adult thrillers.
I've never seen that movie, so
it's actually really good. It's a good movie.
I don't know much about it. I guess I'm just thinking of, I don't know if you remember this, but Kevin Costner for a while was like, a lot of women liked his butt or something. Like he was just he was a heartthrob to a lot of women. And I just wondered if this was like the movie that kind of did that, because I don't know that I think he's great in Untouchables. Untouchables is great, but I wouldn't say that's like a heartthrob kind of a movie. So.
What do you think of his butt?
I don't think about his butt. I don't know. Kevin Costner's fine. I don't think about him.
I was watching something recently where they were talking about Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Yeah.
I remember there's a scene where Maid Marian first sees him where he climbs out of the water, like down by a waterfall, and he's naked, and you see his butt.
I mean, this was a big thing. It
was a big deal. Well, I just found out that was a butt double.
Oh.
But what's weird about that, and I've seen Prince of Thieves many times, so I remember that butt, because what I remember about...
I didn't remember that happened, if you want to know. I didn't.
Well, I did, and what I remember
Yeah.
about that butt specifically is that he has some of the worst... he's like the worst tan lines you've ever seen.
Oh.
Like he's pretty tan, but then he's got this extremely white, flat ass. And when I learned that was a butt double, I was like, really? Like that's because as a big star, you would think
Right.
like one of the perks of being a big celebrity is that you get to pick your own body double.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
if I was him, I would have picked a really nice tan ass.
Or you'd think makeup would have been able to do something about that. But
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's why I always assumed it was his real butt, because it wasn't a great butt.
I see. And that's us talking about Kevin Costner's butt. All right. Well, moving on.
Well, the last comedy I noted was Who Framed Roger Rabbit,
Oh, yeah.
which was a big sensation at the time, famed for combining animation and live action and for having both Disney characters and the Warner Brothers characters in the same movie.
Right.
It was
I wonder
released
if that would
by
happen today.
Touchstone.
I feel like that would never happen today.
No, it was quite an
Yeah.
intellectual property mashup,
Yeah.
for sure, and featured our friend
Yes.
Kathleen as Jessica Rabbit, voicing the bombshell Jessica Rabbit when she was 8 months pregnant.
I love this story.
Yeah,
It's a
so
great
funny.
story. Yeah, that she did that when she was so pregnant.
Extremely pregnant. Yeah.
Yeah. Good gig.
Yeah. So the action movies I was talking about, so Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme kind of had their breakthroughs. Steven Seagal was the Aikido instructor for Michael Ovitz. Michael Ovitz was he was the most powerful agent in Hollywood in the 80s. I think he was at CAA, Creative Artists. And one day, here's how powerful Michael Ovitz was. I mean, one day I think he just had the idea, I think my Aikido instructor would make a cool action hero.
Yeah.
And was able to make it happen. And so that movie is Above the Law, which was a Warner Brothers movie. It was directed by Andrew Davis, who's a phenomenal action director. He made Code of Silence, which is Chuck Norris's best film, and The Fugitive, and a number of other movies. And so it was a good intro for Seagal. And the other one is Van Damme, who had been in movies before in small parts and as villains and stuff. But his first big movie where he was the star and was a hero was Bloodsport.
Yeah.
Which is a movie that Lisa weirdly loves, despite it not being at all a movie.
No,
that's in your wheelhouse.
If I may say, I refused to watch those movies kind of at the time. My brother was really into those kind of movies, the Van Damme and Seagal movies, like you're saying. I just wouldn't watch them. But more recently in my life, like within the last 10 years, I decided to give some of them a try. And I don't know, I just loved Bloodsport. I'm not sure I can explain it, but I really like it. I don't know. It's fun. It's a really fun movie. It's wild.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's really insane. Yeah.
Dopey is all get out, but like super fun.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's just, I feel like to me, Van Damme is more appealing than Seagal too. Like I think he's,
Well, Van Damme kind of seems like he's in on the joke.
Yeah, maybe that's
and Seagal seems really self-serious.
Right.
Which makes him a joke. An even bigger joke than Van Damme could ever be.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I've long dreamt. I mean, if you want to have fun someday, folks at home, dial up your YouTube and just type in Steven Seagal's story. And there's a lot of people that have really amazing stories about Steven Seagal.
Yeah.
Steven Tobolowsky, the character actor, has a really great one. There's, of course, the famous story about him pooping his pants on the set of Out for Justice. Yeah, I mean, he's just, the stories are crazy. And there's a Michel Gondry short film.
Oh my God.
About his daughter. I wish I could remember the name of it, but it's not revealed. It's about this woman and you're like, why am I watching this? And she's talking about her dad and you're like, you're not sure why this movie exists and you don't know who she is. And then halfway through the movie, they reveal that her dad is Steven Seagal.
This movie blew my mind. I sat down on the couch one day and you're like, watch this. And I'm watching this just as you're saying, thinking, okay, what am I watching? What is this? And all of a sudden, Steven Seagal. And I was like, oh, no twist. I'd never seen as big a twist as that. I think in any movie.
Yeah. It's
amazing.
wild.
Yeah. It's really good.
It's like a 15-minute movie.
Yeah. It's a great Michel Gondry short. I recommend it.
Yeah. I have, of course, had one experience with Seagal myself.
You have?
Yes.
Let's hear it.
Well, nowhere near as good as any of these stories that you would find on YouTube. It's just that I happened to see him. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that even makes it interesting was what he was wearing.
Well, tell us where you were. Give us a little context.
I was on the Universal backlot and saw him with a bunch of other guys standing around outside a trailer as I was walking to the building where I worked. And he was wearing full head-to-toe buckskin.
Yep.
He was in an old
an old Western
Tom Mix movie or something. Yeah.
Was it fringed? Give us a little.
Yes.
Yeah. Fringed buckskin.
Yeah. It was like that light tan khaki colored buckskin. It had fringes on the arms. And
Any
I
other
thought,
decor?
well, I remember seeing it and thinking like, oh, he must be shooting something here where he has to wear that.
Sounds costumey.
Not a guy that I would cast as a Native American, but whatever.
Yeah.
And so I kept waiting like a year after I saw him for whatever this movie would be. Mm-hmm. It never came out, which leads me to think
he was just
it's just what he was wearing.
Could be. I mean, this is Steven Seagal we're talking about.
Yeah.
So easily.
I mean, it was in the era where he fashioned himself as like an eco warrior. He made a movie called, On Deadly Ground with Michael Caine.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
I feel like he was wearing stuff that was kind of like that in that movie, but you said that it wasn't. I think when we watched it relatively recently, you were like,
it was not that movie.
Not what he was
no.
wearing. Yeah.
No.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. So what's your favorite Van Damme movie? Is it Bloodsport or is it Breakin'?
Well, I mean, those are both great. Actually, it's funny. Another one that came to mind is Time Cop, which I actually also really like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's actually not a bad time travel movie.
No,
Sudden Death is a legitimately good action movie where it's Die Hard in a hockey rink, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
Speaking of Die Hard in a blank movies.
I'm kind of a Van Damme fan.
Yeah, did you ever see JCVD?
I was going to say that's another.
He's actually really great in it. He's got this 12-minute unbroken monologue, which is quite. He's actually a good actor. Oh,
yeah, he is.
I should tell this story, but I should tell the people at home my JCVD story.
Oh, so we've got Seagal and JCVD.
Do you remember
stories.
my JCVD story? I think I've shown this to you.
Don't tell me.
You'll remember this as I start to tell you.
Yeah, let's hear it.
This was back in the days where you had to take your film into photomats to get them developed.
Very 80s, 90s experience.
And I was working in Van Nuys, and there was a drugstore across the street, like a Rite Aid type thing. Yeah. And I went over there to pick up my photos, and the guy gave me my little package of photos. Do you remember those little envelopes that your photos used to get?
Oh, yeah.
And I was walking back to work, and I took them out, and they weren't my photos. It was like a family barbecue, around a pool. It was just all these people, and I was just like, oh, these aren't mine. And so I turn around and I start walking back to the photomat, and I flip them through the pictures, and there's Van Damme.
Oh my God!
He was in the photos.
You had Van Damme's family snapshots?
I did, and so I went in.
That's crazy.
I know. I don't know why I didn't keep them. I was crazy for not keeping them.
You're a good person.
I guess so. It just didn't occur to me to keep them.
But you're a good person.
But in retrospect later, I'm like, I could have still, maybe I was thinking I want my photo. I remember thinking, these aren't mine and I want my photos. But I don't know why I couldn't have just gone back the next day and picked up my photos anyway and also kept his photos. But
you weren't thinking in your head, oh my God, Van Damme's going to come after me with his martial arts skills?
No, that didn't occur. I just remember thinking I want my photos.
Yeah, that's a wild story.
So I took them back and I gave them to the clerk, who was a young guy like myself. Yeah. And I handed him back and he looked at him and he goes, "Oh my God."
Maybe he was worried that he was
I
going to
think
get
he
a
was.
roundhouse.
He was like, "Oh my God." He's like, "He would have killed me."
Wow, that's an amazing. I mean, I guess this is what happens when you work in LA for any length of time, like you did.
Yeah, some of these weird
Things like
celebs.
this
Who,
happen.
it wasn't even an encounter with him. I never
No.
met him or saw him. It was.
I kind of think it's
an
even
encounter
better
with
in
his
some
photos.
ways, though.
Yeah,
That's a great story.
yeah, it was strange.
I love that.
What he was doing getting his photos done in Van Nuys is beyond me because there's no way Van Damme lived in Van Nuys. But anyway,
Maybe he was working out.
maybe
there.
he was working nearby or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, those were the big action debuts. And it's funny because, as I was saying, I think of those guys as like 80s action heroes. Like I would lump them in with Norris and Schwarzenegger and Stallone and Bronson.
Sure.
But obviously they came along
a little later
in the game. Yeah,
Well, they were
for
really
sure.
big
They were
in the
more
early
90s
90s,
action
for sure.
stars, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you have? Other key films?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know that these are key films, but it's kind of this weird little sub theme I vaguely remember from the 80s was like the young couple having a baby film.
Yep.
And there were a couple of them this year. To be honest, I haven't seen either of them, so you can probably speak to them more than I can. But She's Having a Baby,
Yep.
which I think is John
Hughes, yeah. And was noteworthy for being his first like pseudo adult
Right.
movie. And he would have another one in the back half of '88 called Planes and Trains and Automobiles.
Oh, uh-huh.
But this was the first one. It was Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth
Yeah.
McGovern from Downton Abbey.
Right. That's how most folks are doing
Yeah.
today.
And it's a very like, it's essentially really about the Bacon character and how he's afraid about being tied down and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe Kate Bush wrote this woman's work for She's Having a Baby, which also kind of blew my mind.
She wrote it for the movie?
I think she did.
Oh,
I'm not 100%
I mean, it's definitely
sure
in
about
it. It's prominently featured. I didn't realize it was
I think
written
it might
for
have
the
been.
film.
That's my memory. I could be wrong. It's certainly in the film, and I think she might have actually. I mean, of course, Kate Bush writes something like that for, like, a movie that nobody remembers. It's just, she's amazing.
Yeah.
I also didn't see this movie, but I saw it on the list and I was like, oh, I remember this being out. For Keeps, which I think is maybe about teens. Molly Ringwald.
Oh God,
is
yeah.
in it.
I forgot about that movie. It's like Molly Ringwald and somebody.
who the guy
Is it
is
Robert
in it.
Downey Jr.?
Oh, that might be right. But I just kind of remember these movies being around and in the air. These
Yeah,
sort
they
of-
were a thing.
Yeah,
Betsy's Wedding. There were like a lot of these kind of young,
sort of struggling with having a first baby.
yeah,
kind
these
of-
serial
kind of
comic.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a
Yeah,
thing.
you're
I
right. It was a
remember.
thing.
There were just a couple of other, let's see, what else do I have here? I mean, this seems like a key film simply because it's Spike Lee, School Days.
Yeah. It was
I don't know how big it was, but
well, it wasn't a hit by any means.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's even especially fondly remembered, but it was a
Yeah.
big deal because it was his first movie with a budget. So he had made She's Gotta Have It before
Right.
this, which kind of made a splash, but that was almost a homemade movie.
yeah.
So this, I think he had like a $6 million budget. It's a musical.
Yeah, I've seen a little of it.
Yeah.
It's very, I don't know if it's about historically black.
Yeah, I think it's
universities,
about
but it's
it.
something like
Yeah, I
that.
think so.
Yeah, it's got some great music in it.
Yep.
That's what I remember. Bright Lights, Big City, which is very super 80s. Isn't that a Jay McInerney novel?
Yeah, Jay McInerney. Yeah, it's very. There were a few of these too, right? Less Than Zero.
Yeah.
The Bret Easton Ellis adaptation. Slaves of New York. The Tama Janowitz book was turned into a movie.
Yep.
Yeah, none of them were hits. They all bombed. I think they all got pretty bad reviews too. Bright Lights, Big City is not a bad movie. It's just got a bit of miscasting. It's like, I love Michael J. Fox. He's just not exactly right for it.
That makes sense. I've never seen it, but
It's not a bad movie.
Yeah.
It's worth seeing, but it's, but yeah. And as an artifact of the 80s, like it's one of those movies definitely that you could use to explain the 80s.
Well, we should say what it's about. I mean, I don't think we've really
it's just about a trader.
Yeah, it's like Wall Street, drugs, New York City, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have some family history with this movie.
Oh, yeah?
My grandfather was a carpenter on movie sets in New York, and he worked on this movie, and he went to the wrap party and met Michael J. Fox.
Oh, nice.
I think he met him on the set, too, but I remember him bringing home his autograph for me, which...
Oh, that's cool. Do you still have it?
I really wish I did. It may be somewhere. I've had a hard time locating it, which makes me incredibly sad.
You used to have Michael J. Fox's autograph, and now you don't know where it is.
It was on the wrap party card.
I would have had that thing framed.
I know, it was on the Bright Lights Big City like wrap party card and everything. Huh. I'm an idiot. Maybe it's somewhere. I'll have to look around, but I can see it in my head. I did have it at one time.
I have a picture of myself with Burt Reynolds on our refrigerator, and you can't find your Michael J. Fox.
I'm a fool.
Yeah. All right.
But that's my family connection to Bright Lights Big City.
I had a few others. A couple of big bombs, as I said. Well, I don't know that these were, they were disappointments, I guess. I don't know that they were classified as exactly as bombs, but Rambo 3, the aforementioned Rambo 3, in which Rambo fights with the Taliban against the Russians.
Oh my gosh.
Interesting to look at it now.
Doesn't hold up super well, I guess.
And it's just not a great movie. It wasn't a great movie then, and it's still not. And Willow.
Oh yeah.
The Ron Howard fantasy movie with Warwick Davis and
I love
Val Kilmer, which is now very fondly remembered, so much so that it birthed a streaming series, decades later. But at the time was a huge budget movie that did not return at the box office, nor did it get good reviews. So it's one of those movies whose esteem has grown over the years, especially among genre nerds.
Yeah.
Colors, which is a Dennis Hopper drama with Sean Penn and Robert Duvall as LAPD. And it's about gangs, gang warfare. It was one of the first movies that really approached that issue in a serious way. Stand and Deliver. Yeah. Which is a true story of Jaime Escalante, who was an Hispanic math teacher in East LA, who, turned a school full of, historically kind of underachieving students into one of the top schools in the state in terms of math acumen. It's a really great movie. Yeah, Lou Diamond Phillips is in it, and it's Edward James Olmos plays Escalante. He was nominated for an Oscar, and he's just phenomenal in it.
Yeah, he really is.
It was produced in part by American Playhouse, I think, PBS.
Oh.
Yeah, so it had its premiere on PBS. I remember that
cool.
As a kid. Yeah. And then Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a big cult classic made by the Chiodo brothers, who were these guys who had had a long career in practical effects. And were given, $5 to make their own movie, and this is what they made. And
Killer Clowns with a K, by the way.
Killer Clowns with a K. Yeah.
Title.
Yeah. It's quite a movie. It's wacky. I just watched it again recently after having seen it since it came out. Yeah. And it is what it is.
God bless them for going out there.
People
and
that love
something.
It really love it though.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a cult classic. This is a movie where if we want to talk about the TV guide, I remember I used to just scour the TV guide, I was just kind of interested in looking at it and seeing what was on, even if I couldn't watch it, which is weird, but how I was. And I remember seeing this title and thinking, what in the world is that? I was super intrigued by something called Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And I've only seen bits of it. I've never sat down to watch the whole thing, but yeah. It was intriguing.
I don't think you need to.
Yeah, I'm probably okay without it in my life. But.
All right, should we move on to Unsung Gems?
Well, just a minute, though. There were two other things I noticed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This was kind of a year of River Phoenix. There are three movies, I think, just in this half of the year.
What were they?
Little Nikita, Running on Empty, and A Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon.
Oh, right.
I've never seen any of these movies, but I remembered him being in them, and I thought, oh my God, it was like... we're like front loaded with River Phoenix here, who was kind of an 80s icon who burned out real fast, unfortunately.
Yeah, but, I think his only Oscar nomination came from Running on Empty. I think he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Okay. Yeah.
But none of those movies made any kind of
No, and I'm not saying they did.
any
but
kind of splash
he was
at all.
kind of a big deal for a while. You know, he was a great actor who died pretty tragically, and this was just a year of a lot of films he was in.
Yeah.
I noticed. And I also noticed a couple of those famous 80s body switch movies.
Oh, yeah.
This year we had Vice Versa and 18 Again. Both came out this year. So the 80s body switch was alive and well in 1988.
I thought those were last year. Didn't we talk about those in the last episode?
I think we might have talked about them in a quiz episode. They were on my 88 list, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Big was the only one that was really any good. And I guess that wasn't technically a body switch movie.
It's not switching two different bodies.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is sort of a body switch movie. The idea is the same.
All right. I have a few comedies and a few thrillers in the Unsung Gems
let's talk about
category. Let's do thrillers first.
Okay.
The Serpent and the Rainbow is a really interesting horror film by Wes Craven. Probably his best movie in my book. I actually just read this book recently. It's a nonfiction book by an anthropologist named Wade Davis, who was studying Haiti and the voodoo religion and reports of zombies. And, what he was able to determine that it was all pharmacological, that they were taking these medications that made them appear to be dead and made it hard to detect whether they were actually still alive. The most interesting thing about that book to me was learning that there are like 32 ways to verify somebody's death, and none of them are particularly reliable, including heartbeat.
Whoa. Yeah, I guess I could see. Wow.
Yeah, which is very strange. It's hard to imagine how that can be true. Either your heart's beating or it's not.
Yeah, but it could stop for a little while and come back.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So people were being buried and then coming back, and they weren't really zombies. They were people that had died temporarily, which I guess is what a zombie is, if you think about it.
Well, there was nothing supernatural about it, I guess.
The film, of course, Hollywood's the hell out of this pretty dry nonfiction text, but it does it in a way that's pretty intelligent for a 80s horror movie, especially pretty intelligent by Wes Craven standards, I think, and is I think a pretty cool movie. Shoot to Kill.
Great movie.
Which is, you'll find out next week, was my favorite movie of 88.
You love that movie.
A true hidden gem.
Yeah.
Like, if one of the ideas behind us doing this podcast was to alert people to movies that they might have missed, this is like the poster child for that to me. This is a truly phenomenal thriller, an action suspense adventure movie that nobody knows.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I've ever met anybody who I've told about this movie that has ever heard of it.
I mean, I hadn't until you showed it to me. Yeah. It's got quite a killer cast.
Oh my God. So the premise of it is that there's a killer. He's like a diamond thief, essentially, and he's being pursued by an FBI agent played by the great Sidney Poitier. This is one of his he made two movies in this era that were his big return to making film after not being in a film for like a decade and a half or something like that. It was this and the aforementioned Little Nikita with
that's right, with River Phoenix. Yeah.
So, but in Shoot to Kill, he's an FBI agent, and the killer escapes into the mountains between Washington and Canada, and he's trying obviously to get to Canada, and Poitier has to capture him before he gets to Canada, and he kind of contracts or forces this mountain guide played by Tom Berenger to lead him into the wilderness to track this guy down.
Right.
And, it's high mountain adventure movies, as you know, are a weakness of mine. I just really like a lot of them.
But I don't think
this
that's
is probably the best one.
Yeah. The writing is great.
It's also a great film noir.
Yeah.
It's got this great jazz score by Tom Scott. Just a really smart, cool movie. The action is great. The scenery is incredible. Just an excellent genre movie. And I've never, met somebody who I've recommended it to who hasn't come back to me later and went, holy hell, that was really good.
It's really good.
So worth seeing.
Takeaway from this episode.
Yeah.
Go see Shoot to Kill.
Another one that a lot of people don't know about is Frantic.
I'm surprised
which
people
you
don't
love.
know.
So why don't
I
you
do
tell them
love
about?
it.
Give me a chance to take a drink of water here.
Yeah. So Frantic is it's Harrison Ford as the lead. Betty Buckley plays his wife. They go to Paris for sort of a business trip, I guess. Harrison Ford's like a cardiologist or a doctor of some kind.
He's giving a talk at a conference.
Yeah, sorry, it's not a bit. It's sort of it's a conference. And they get there, and like within the first couple of hours that they check into their hotel, Harrison Ford's wife gets kidnapped. Or he thinks she's been kidnapped, but it's not totally clear. And the rest of the movie is him looking for her, and he's frantic. I just think it's such a wonderful. You really feel the mood of it. It's quite a thriller. It's Harrison Ford not being Indiana Jones, like he's sort of an everyman in a sort of.
Yeah, he's a little hapless in a lot of situations.
He's just trying because no one will help him. Basically, like he can't really convince anyone. Like a lot of you hear this a lot with kidnappings that if it's an adult being kidnapped, they'll wait a really long time to start looking for the person because they're an adult. They could have just gone away on their own. So he really can't get help, and he's just looking through Paris.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest kind of Hitchcock movies, not actually made by Hitchcock.
So
it's clearly like it's a Polanski movie, and it's very clearly Polanski's homage to Alfred Hitchcock because it's like the innocent man thrust into a situation where he's over his head and in an environment where he doesn't even speak the language. Yeah,
and it's so I was just thinking about this today. As we were going to talk about it, it's set in Paris, but it's not like the flashy, glitzy Paris that I think you're kind of used to seeing in movies. It's very like grungy, normal, everyday Paris in a way. And so that's kind of interesting too. And it really gives you that feeling, I think, of jet lag. Like jet lag kind of plays a big role in this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's a really good movie.
Yeah. And then the last one I noted, and this is not a great movie, but it's fun if you like these guys. There's a film called The Presidio.
Oh yeah, I like this movie.
Yeah, which was it's a fairly conventional murder mystery about a murder that happens on the Presidio in San Francisco, and Mark Harmon plays the police officer who has to team up with Sean Connery, who's like a high-ranking general or something there to solve the mystery of this murder. And it's very much in that, Shoot to Kill is in this vein too. It was like a buddy movie era of like pair these two unlikely people together and they have to solve a crime.
Yeah. I kind of love those sort of movies, I'm realizing. So
yeah, a lot of them are really, a lot of them, there are a lot of terrible ones I could mention that you'll be like, I've never heard of that. And there's a reason for it. They were a dime a dozen in the 80s. Thanks to Lethal Weapon, which we talked about in the last episode. So we'll be talking about, I'm sure, more Lethal Weapon ripoffs in the next few episodes, but it was because it was a pretty influential movie in terms of launching, much like Die Hard, launching a subgenre of action movie, which is the buddy movie. Yeah. Yep. Some comedies, some noteworthy comedies. Funny Farm, which for my money is one of the funniest, just purely funniest movies released in the 80s.
It's so
and the
funny
last
that
20 minutes of Funny Farm is it's like the greatest comedy filmmaking of the 80s. It is that funny. It's so funny. It's mind-bogglingly funny. And it's, it's Chevy Chase plays a guy who buys a house he's from New York and he's a sports writer and he buys a house in Connecticut or someplace, somewhere in New England.
Pretty sure it's Connecticut.
And to write the great American novel, his dream, and find, everything goes wrong and it's all horrible. It's very broad, but very, very funny. And Chase is at the top of his form. Yeah. And they decide to sell the house. And in the last 20 minutes, they've realized that everybody in their town is an absolute psychopath and that it's a terrible place to live. And so they pay everybody in the town to act normal.
Yep.
And what these people's idea of normal is so insane. They base everything on Norman Rockwell catalogs.
Don't they have this big community meeting and they bring Saturday Evening Posts to the meeting and they hand them out to everybody to be like, this is what we want you to act like. Yeah. I remember
and
that.
And those people's interpretation of that is what makes it last 20 minutes where they're showing this couple, this potential buyers, the house and the town. Oh my God, it's
Cue
funny.
the
I could watch
deer.
it. Sometimes I throw that movie in just to watch the last 20 minutes. Like that's how much I love it.
With you, I've seen the last 20 minutes of this film more than the whole thing.
Yeah.
For sure. I feel like this is your comedic shoot to kill a little bit. Like you... And it's funny that they're both in the same
I think
year.
people, the difference is like nobody knows Shoot to Kill. I think some people know Funny Farm.
Yeah.
I think it has a I think people, especially Gen X, like people know it.
Yeah. But I feel like you have a similar
But I'll tell you one people don't,
affection.
which is also really funny. Is a movie called Biloxi Blues.
Oh, yeah.
It's a Neil Simon movie. Herbert Ross directed it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the sequel to Brighton Beach Memoirs.
Yes, yeah.
And it's about Neil Simon's time in basic training. And it's Matthew Broderick plays Neil Simon, essentially. And
such a titan.
And Christopher Walken is the drill sergeant.
Yeah, that's right.
And Biloxi, and they're both those guys are great. And Herbert Ross is obviously one of the great directors of the 80s. But what blows my mind when I watch that movie is how good the script is. Of course
Neil
it is because it's Neil Simon, but holy hell, it is just
it's really good.
One diamond caliber one-liner after another. It's every 30 seconds or so, there's a one-liner in that movie, which is just wildly funny and so smart that sometimes you don't even laugh at it because it's the writing is so good that you're like, holy crap, that is really good writing.
Astonished.
Yeah, you're like more in awe. Like you're so in awe you can't even laugh at it.
Yeah. You're right. It's excellent. I'm surprised more people don't know about that. I mean, I had
They should. It's a great movie. It's very sweet. Penelope Ann Miller plays like the girl in town that Matthew Broderick falls for, and it's very funny and has just some amazing sequences in it.
Yeah, Neil Simon he is a titan. He's definitely a titan of like 60s, 70s, 80s, whenever he was around. He's wonderful. Good pick.
Yeah, there's a movie called Big Business, which I like a lot. It was another one of those Bette Midler Touchstone comedies.
Yeah, I love that.
It's very, very broad. It's made by one of the Zucker brothers, I think.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And you can kind of tell it's very broad, but it's also a very old-fashioned movie. It almost feels like it could star like what's her name? The famous platinum blonde comedy actress from
Carol Lombard, I think.
Lombard. It feels like it could be, or like an old Barbara Stanwyck Christmas in Connecticut kind of. It's very slapsticky and it all takes place in the. It's about two sets of twins.
Yep.
And it all takes place in the plaza.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, we've got Lily Tomlin and Bette Midler.
It's just really cool.
Yeah, it's Lily Tomlin and Bette Midler. You don't get much better than that in some ways. Delightful.
And then one that I'm not sure you've even heard of this, but a movie called Dudes. Do you know Dudes?
I had heard of it, but I don't remember why, and I don't know what it is. So please explain.
I remember renting this in the 80s and seeing the cover of it on the VHS and being like, what is this? Yeah. And then like still wondering what I had just seen after having watched it. It's a really odd movie. It's Penelope Spheris.
Oh.
Who went on to do pretty mainstream stuff like Wayne's World and the Beverly Hillbillies and some other questionable stuff, but started her career
Girls Gotta Eat
as a hardcore punk filmmaker. Yeah. She did the Decline of Western Civilization trilogy, which is a documentary trilogy about punk and heavy metal music. And Dudes comes out of that. It's she made a movie called Suburbia for Roger Corman, which is a punk rock movie. And this is a hardcore punk rock comedy about two punks from New York who their car breaks down in a western town in like Arizona or Nevada or someplace. It's been a long time since I've seen it. So I don't remember exactly, but they run afoul of these kind of like hillbillies in the desert, and it's John Cryer and Daniel Roebuck play the two punks.
Okay, yes.
Catherine Mary Stewart is like the girl that's in the town that they meet, and it essentially starts as a comedy and kind of turns into an action / horror movie, like with these punks versus these like hillbilly cowboys. Yeah, very strange, original. Like nothing else like it movie if that's your game. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned John Cryer, again, I haven't seen it, but I know I've seen like bits of it or images. I remember it now.
Yeah. So do you have any other unsung gems that we didn't get to?
Well, was Rent-A-Cop this year? I saw
It was
on my list.
Yeah, I had it down under B movies.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I mean, I like Rent-A-Cop, so maybe
Yeah.
that's why. But
Well, tell people what Rent-A-Cop is.
Rent-A-Cop it's sort of like an action comedy, kind of, with Burt Reynolds and Liza Minnelli. The wonderful Liza Minnelli. It's set in Chicago. Liza Minnelli sees like a hit or a murder or something. And Burt, I forget how she hooks up with Burt Reynolds, but
he was there during the hit. He's a detective.
Oh, he's a detective.
And then he gets thrown off the force. And so she hires him to protect her.
Right.
Because the killer is looking for her. James Remar plays the killer.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
He's like
James
a dancer.
Remar
His
in a
name
movie.
is Dancer. And he's like a dancer, but he's also got like a knife that shoots out of his hand. And
I didn't remember that.
it's a pretty wild movie. Yeah. It's really fun. I put it in B movies because it's a total B movie.
Yeah. I guess it is.
These two were not at the top of their career game, but we're still kind of plugging away. They were both making movies. They were just like they were not the stars that they were in the 70s. And this movie has been derided, perhaps fairly, by a lot of people. But if you're in the right mood and like for a really cheesy movie with a couple of big stars who are still have a lot of glitter on them, I think.
I think so. I mean,
then you could do worse than Rent-A-Cop, which also I have to mention has a great Jerry Goldsmith score. One of my favorite scores of the 80s, maybe. It's a weird score. It's a synth-based jazz score.
It's really good,
but it's really good.
Yeah.
Jerry Goldsmith is one of the greats, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I think I didn't see this movie till later, so it didn't have that context of like, oh, these are sort of,
past their prime
stars. So I'm just seeing Liza be fantastic because she's always, she's almost never not
she's
fantastic.
giving it her all, yeah.
And Burt Reynolds was also really, being his Burt Reynolds best, in my opinion. So like it was fun to watch them interact. I think Chicago is really fun in this. So Chicago's the setting. And I feel like it gives you a really good feel for like Chicago in the winter. And I always like when a movie does that. So it's, as you say, I'm sure it's a B movie and has some bad things, but I enjoy
Speaking
it.
of Burt in Chicago, he made another one called Switching Channels with Kathleen Turner and Christopher Reeve, which is also very derided. Critic got bad reviews, didn't make any money.
Yeah.
Our friend Kathleen says it's the one movie she regrets making.
Yeah.
She and Burt did not get along, to put it mildly.
Maybe explain what it is.
But it's a remake of The Front Page, which was itself remade, and it was a play. It was remade into His Girl Friday, which is probably the most famous iteration of it.
Yeah.
It's a set in the world of cable news television, so it's got like a kind of a fake CNN in it.
Updated.
Yeah. And it's not great, but if you like those actors, I like all three of those actors quite a bit. And it has a very old-fashioned, just like everybody's talking really fast. It's like His Girl Friday.
Yeah.
It's very much like The Front Page. They kept the spirit of The Front Page. Like people talk a mile a minute, and you could do worse. Is all I'm saying.
I'm the kind of person
if you like those actors.
I always love those kind of 30s fast talking movies, and I remember enjoying it.
Yeah. So I had a couple other B. Did you have any B movies that you wanted to mention?
I had one more B movie.
Yeah,
You're probably going to mention it though.
Okay, say it.
Monkey Shines.
Oh, I didn't have that. How did I miss that?
I don't know.
That was this. That was during this period.
I saw it on the list. I haven't. I'm not sure I've seen the whole thing, but it's a movie that I came in on the middle of, like maybe 10 or 12 years ago. My brother was watching it, and I came in at it, and I thought, what in the world? Is this thing? Maybe you can explain Monkey
It's a
Shines.
George Romero movie about a man who is, I think it's been a while.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the scene.
Yeah.
There's a scene in this movie that if you've seen this movie, you'll never forget. Like, you'll know for the rest of your life, oh, I've seen Monkey Shines, even if you remember nothing about it, because you will remember how it ends, my friends. Monkey Shines has an ending for the books. But anyway, it's a movie about a guy who, I think he's in an accident and he's paralyzed from the neck down. Right, and they get him, like you do, a monkey to help him out.
A helper monkey, right.
Yeah, a helper monkey who he develops a psychic bond with. And of course, because he's a very angry guy now in this wheelchair, and I think he was like betrayed by his girlfriend or something. I don't remember exactly what. The monkey starts killing people that he wishes were dead. Until he figures out what's going on. Then it becomes a face-off between him and the monkey. And I won't spoil it for you because everyone deserves to see that ending cold for the first time.
You do.
And Monkey Shines is not a good movie. It's a George Romero movie, weirdly. It's not a good movie. And I'm not suggesting you spend 90 minutes of your life watching it. But I will say, you could do worse than to go to YouTube and punch in Monkey Shines finale. And
if anything we're saying piques your interest, you might want to experience just a little of this film. Like I said, I came in cold to this movie in the middle of it, not knowing what it was. And it's astonishing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. I had a few others. We're over an hour, so I'm going to run through these really quick.
Yep.
A few other B movies here. Red Heat.
Okay.
Have you ever seen Red Heat?
The title's familiar, but
it's another buddy movie.
Remembering.
It's a sassy Chicago cop teaming up with a Russian police officer. It's Schwarzenegger and Jim Belushi.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think I've seen
It's a Walter Hill movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's really good.
Of Streets of Fire.
Yeah, it's also Chicago. It's got good action in it. It's got one-liners. It's got everything you want out of a Schwarzenegger
I would watch
80s
that.
action movie. Yeah, it's pretty fun. Mm-hmm. Messenger of Death, which is a terrible title, but kind of an interesting movie with Bronson.
Oh, okay.
He plays an investigative reporter who goes into this kind of like a Mennonite society, like almost like an Amish society where there was a murder, and he's investigating. It's like a mass murder. Has an incredible opening, terrifying opening 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just better than the average Bronson canon movie, which is what it is.
Canon.
Lady in White, which is a ghost story. We just watched this recently.
Did we?
You're like, I don't remember. It's the one with Catherine Hellman.
Oh, yes.
Lucas Haas.
Yes.
It's like a period horror movie for kids, kind of like a ghost story for little kids.
Yes.
It's got some dodgy effects in it, but it's a pretty smart and creepy little movie.
Like a self-funded movie, I think, wasn't it? Or it was like
very low budget. Yeah.
Interesting story. Mm-hmm.
And finally, Maniac Cop, which is a terrible title, I realize, but it's actually a pretty fun movie with I'm blanking. Bruce Campbell.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as coming after a cop who's like going after, he's a cop and he's trying to find this cop who's killing people, murdering people.
Cop,
a maniac cop, yes. And it turns out it's kind of supernatural.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know that. Boy, that sounds like a terrible pitch,
well,
but it's
Bruce
actually
Campbell
not bad.
Could sell that. I mean, sure.
And then I have a few so bad it's good. Did you have any so bad it's good movies?
I mean, I guess Monkey Shines was my so bad it's good. Yeah.
Hero in the Tear, which is a Chuck Norris canon movie where he's after a giant serial killer.
A giant serial killer?
Yeah.
Okay.
The guy who in Happy Gilmore, like that giant guy in Happy Gilmore.
Oh, you literally mean, like a really big guy.
Yeah, like a huge guy,
wow.
like a really big guy. Yeah, it's not good, but it's got some stuff in it that's really fun. Mm-hmm. Moving, a Richard Pryor comedy about the horrors of moving.
That's fair.
Yeah, Dana Carvey's in it.
Oh wow!
It has that great bit where he tours a house that he's going to buy, and as he's touring it, the couple that owns the house keeps going, "Do you like the pool? Well, don't get used to it. We're taking it with us." And then they start laughing and they like elbow him in the ribs and they all kind of laugh. And then they go into the kitchen and they're like, "Yeah, we've got these cabinets from Budapest or whatever, but we're taking them with us."
Right.
Ha ha ha. And they laugh and they elbow him in the ribs.
Right.
And then like 2 scenes later when they're moving into the house, everything's gone. The pool is gone. The cabinets are gone. And they call him and they're like, where is it? And they're like, we told you we were taking it with us.
That's funny.
And then The Great Outdoors, which is a really bad, might have been a John Hughes comedy, I think.
I mean, John Candy's in it,
Candy's
right?
in it. I think Hughes might have wrote it. It's him and Aykroyd on like a family vacation in the woods.
Big 80s theme right
Very
there.
broad, like, John Candy skiing. It's an overweight guy who skis.
Right,
and that's supposed to be, but it does have something that is in Morrow lore has been quoted all
in your family.
In my family.
Yeah.
Because we saw this in the theater and for some reason the Morrows were rolling on the floor during the old 96er.
The old 96er.
Yeah, they go to a restaurant and there's a 96-ounce steak on the menu and Candy's like, really? That's a big steak. And they're like, yeah, if you finish it, your whole family eats free. And they're like, you can do it, Dad. You can do it, Dad. Right. So Candy orders the old 96er, which is what it's called. Yep. And it's quite a funny scene watching him try to finish the old 96er. Yeah. He thinks he's done and they point out that he has to finish the gristle and the bones.
That's right. It's the one thing I remember.
So anytime after that, like whenever I'm out with my family and somebody's having trouble finishing something they ordered, it's always like, oh, it's the old 96er.
Yep.
And then this is not a good movie, but here's another scene that you'll never forget if you've seen it. There's a scene in a movie called Critters 2, the main course.
I think I know what you're going to say.
It's a sequel to Critters.
Yeah.
Where if you know the Critters, Critters was a bad ripoff of Gremlins with these little furry
critters,
essentially Gremlins. Yeah. And there's a scene in Critters 2 where they all combine to make one giant critter ball.
Oh, God.
And then they roll through town. And as they roll over everything, they devour it because that's what they do. They eat everything.
Yes.
And so they'll like roll over a person and they'll just leave their skeleton behind. It's so dumb.
Isn't it on fire at some point, or am I misremembering that?
Maybe, I don't remember.
It's the only thing about Critters I know is that big ball of critters.
Yeah. Didn't you say it was very problematic for you, that it bothered you quite a bit?
It does bother me.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that squicks me out.
So speaking of memorable scenes, outside of Monkey Shines and Critters 2.
Very memorable, to be fair.
Let's wrap up real quick here with our rewindable moments, which is what we call some of our favorite scenes, essentially. I've already mentioned one of mine, which was the last 20 minutes of Funny Farm.
I knew that one was going to come up.
Yeah.
I had some from Frantic. I really like the beginning of Frantic, like when they're coming in, they're all jet lagged and the taxi coming in, and then just they're in Harrison Ford and Betty Buckley's interactions in the hotel room at the beginning. It really feels like a married couple kind of interacting. And then just Harrison Ford like climbing on the rooftop at one point. He's on the rooftops of Paris and it's just very suspenseful.
Yep.
I'll let you go next.
I had Sexual Chocolate from
I had that too.
Coming to America.
Coming to America.
One of the funniest things
Sexual
ever.
Chocolate
the toy store scene from Big.
Oh, yeah.
Jessica Rabbit's introduction, her song that she does in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
And just the whole, I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way.
I had the big fight at the end of Bloodsport.
Kumite.
Yeah. There's the fight at the beginning of Red Heat, which happens in a Russian bathhouse.
Oh, my.
And what's great about it is the sound mixer went insane. I don't know if he was drunk that day or what, but every punch in that fight sounds like a building coming down.
Whoa.
It is so resonant and thick and bassy, and it's just hilarious.
Wow.
Like, it sounds like it doesn't sound like you should survive one punch and still be alive. And Schwarzenegger and this guy, Arnold, they're in a bathhouse, and so Arnold's wearing like a towel the size of a washcloth. That's all he's wearing.
Yeah.
And and he and this guy start duking it out, and they go through the wall and they roll down a mountain in the snow.
Whoa.
So they're out there in wearing no clothes in the snow.
Wow.
And it sounds like trees crashing together. That's how these punches sound. And then and then this is weird, but I noticed that a couple of my favorite scenes are opening credits and end credits from a couple movies. So one of my favorite opening shots comes from the aforementioned Rent-A-Cop,
I
the
had that
Burt
too.
Reynolds,
Yeah.
Liza Minnelli. It's just this beautiful helicopter shot that flies really low through the middle of Chicago, over the
really
Illinois
great.
River as it runs through Chicago,
got
and
that
all those
score.
bridges.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it has that beautiful score that I mentioned by Jerry Goldsmith. It's just a kind of an intoxicating
it's wonderful.
opening. And then the end credits of She's Having a Baby
Oh.
are hilarious. It's so funny.
I've never seen it. I'll be honest. I haven't seen the movie.
The movie is, I could kind of take or leave. It's not bad. It's okay. But the end credits are so funny. As the end credits are scrolling, it's just a bunch of people, including a lot of celebrities, mostly celebrities who are friends of John Hughes.
Okay.
So people like John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, Catherine O'Hara. In fact, the Candy and Aykroyd ones were clearly shot on the set of Great Outdoors.
Oh, I see.
Because they're in their costumes.
Right.
But it's people suggesting names for the upcoming, for the baby.
That's funny. Okay.
So yeah, it's very cute and charming and funny.
Wow.
And kind of sweet. I remember Candy has several suggestions like Skippy and I don't know. It's
these are really funny people just being let loose.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
So
Essentially, it's a bunch
funny.
of improv comedy, but it's very funny. It's probably weirdly the best part of that movie, which doesn't say much for that movie, but it's a very charming bit.
Yeah.
What else did you have?
Just one more, I think, charming bit from Big Business. There's a part I always remembered from that movie when one of Bette Midler's characters, she's out on the streets in New York and she's singing with a steel drum band. She's like she's enjoying this steel drum band out on the street and she's really enjoying it and getting into it. And then she starts like singing and dancing. And I don't know, I found it funny.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. It is funny.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. All right, I think that's a wrap on the first half of 1988. Do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I'm psyched for the second half.
Yeah, it was a better year than I even expected, and it's typical of some of these later 80s years. Like I feel like the back half is quite a lot better, even though there are some great movies in the first 6 months here.
Yeah,
the back half of 88 is pretty loaded.
Yep. Get ready.
So, yeah, that's a good preview. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. You've been listening to The Long Rewind. The program is produced by Dustin Morrow and hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli. If you enjoy the show, please consider hitting the subscribe button, leave us a good review on your podcast app, and tell your friends about the program. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.